Sara, you actually interviewed Prince's bodyguard. Let's take a look at that.
I've been on tour with him for months. So if anybody had an addiction, that would be something you would see.
Oh, okay.
That would be something that you would know. That would be something that would be shown, not only through his actions and stuff like that, but through
You get a card. It's like you get a card.
moments when he thinks people's not looking.
Now, Sara, I think he's singing a tune that I actually agree with, which is addiction is different than dependency, and he may be actually reporting something accurate, is that Prince did not actually have addiction per se, which has a lot of behavioral disturbances with it. He didn't say, I never saw the guy take medication.
Right, he's certainly not a doctor, and he didn't mention the difference between addiction and dependency, but he did say, look, I was with him all over the world. I packed his bags. I was there for several years, starting in 2012 up until the day he died. He's like, and I was there watching basically his every move, not only when people were watching him, but when he thought people were not watching him. And he says, I never saw him abusing, and he put it that way, I never saw him abusing drugs of any type. He talked about him being one of the healthiest guys that he'd ever met. He said the guy drank juice. He was a vegetarian. He did not eat anything like the rest of us would eat. He was very careful about what he put into his body. So this is from his perspective and what he saw when he traveled the world with Prince. He was very adamant and very annoyed about some of the reports that are coming out. And Dr. Drew, you've seen all of those reports, but some of them, you know, the doctors showing up here to give tests for Prince, the attorney for the doctor from California saying that he was on a life-saving mission and sending his son to try and come and help Prince. We don't know exactly what that was for, but we certainly know that there was something medical going on with Prince because these doctors wouldn't just show up here. One other thing that his bodyguard, Gaither, who's known as Romeo, told us was that, indeed, sometimes Prince would feel low energy or he'd be feeling a bit under the weather, and that doctors would show up to give him things like B12 shots. He said that's the only thing that he ever saw when a doctor would come around happen, is that he would get some sort of B12 shot to make him feel better, to give him more energy, and that was it. He said he never saw him taking anything that would be considered either prescription drugs or that would be considered illegal drugs. Drew?
Thank you, Sara. Again, B12 is essentially a placebo. I mean, it might be a little something. I wonder what else they might have given him when they were visiting. Again, giving special care for the special person for a B12 shot, which makes no sense at all.
Sara's protecting that guy. I'm going to tell you right now, with all due respect to Sara, that guy is making statements to protect himself. He was advised how to say those words to Sara. Trust me, I know how a lawyer speaks, and he spoke as a lawyer based on his concern for incrimination.
Fortunately, Leo, I do trust you, but Sara wants to respond. Go ahead, Sara.
You can't say that. Do you know this guy? Have you talked to him?
Oh, please.
You have to. He went on camera. He went on camera. He came out on his own. There were no people like stopping him or pushing him around. Came on his own.
For him
to talk
Sara,
about it. Now, maybe what you're saying is true, but for his sake and to be fair, why don't we let him tell us? We haven't seen an attorney. He has not talked about having an attorney, and he's not said anyone has told. Well, let me speak. He has not said anyone has told him what to say. And to be fair, it's been 3 weeks. He could have talked about this a lot earlier when there's a lot more media here talking about what's going on with Prince and making these accusations. So I think, to be fair, he's come forward, he said his piece, he said what he has seen, and he said, look, I don't have an attorney, this is all I saw, and I think we have to be fair to him to say, all right, that's what you saw. If something happens later on, then we may say something different, but I think we should be fair with someone who's come in front of the cameras and spoken not as a source, as an unnamed person, but full-faced.
20-second rebuttal, Dr. Drew.
Go ahead.
20-second rebuttal.
Do it. Shame on you.
And basically this. Look, it is impossible for this guy to sit here on national television during your interview to say that Prince didn't take drugs. Excuse me. He has no personal knowledge to say that.
That's what he said. It's not impossible. He said that.
Okay.